All right, Nadia, thank you so much. Welcome everybody to another session of this Future Spaces webinar series, all leading up to a wonderful SEG conference coming up in August, their 50th anniversary. So I hope to see all of you guys there. Very, very excited to introduce Neil. Let's do next slide. Neil Redding, who's the head of product at Auki Labs. Neil has been in the augmented reality XR space for quite some time. He's a fantastic creative technologist. He's a really amazing thinker on these topics. This is actually a talk that he gave at AWE this year, which I was really, really remiss to miss. So I'm actually incredibly excited to see this. And also, I feel like, you know, with the Apple's Vision Pro announcement, the world in XR has completely changed within just even like the last week. So it's an extremely timely and interesting time for this conversation. I'm very, very much looking forward to the presentation, but also really looking forward to the Q&A. As always, if you have questions, if you have thoughts, please add it into the Q&A. I will try to take your questions over my own, although on this topic, I have so many questions and so many interests. But to that end, I will not waste any more time and hand it off to you, Neil. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Josh and Nadia. Everyone can hear me, I believe. Awesome. So let me also just collapse this as well. So yes, thanks, Josh. I'm Neil Redding. I'm head of product at Auki Labs. And we're here today to talk about why we believe AR is the inevitable future of commerce. Now, I don't use the term inevitable lightly. I imagine you don't either. So we can agree the bar is high here, but let's jump in. So Auki Labs is a spatial positioning company. We're building a decentralized collaborative spatial computing protocol, and we call it the pose mesh. And I'll describe more about this in a minute. But first, you might be asking, why is a spatial positioning company speaking about retail or to retail audiences, right? It's a fair question. So to explain, I'd like to tell a brief story about the near future. It's a bit sci-fi. Hopefully that's okay with all of you. So Auki Labs headquarters is in Hong Kong, which looks something like this. And dozens of other cities in Southeast Asia do as well. And these cities are home to well over 1 billion people collectively. And of course, there are major projects in Saudi Arabia and other nations to create similar kinds of cities. These urban environments are extremely dense and reach up towards the heavens as well as deep underground. Our CEO recently coined the term arboreal, which is a portmanteau of urban and arboreal. In arboreal environments, vertical travel is the norm, it's constant, and 2D maps no longer make sense. The cities of the future are really best understood as volumes and not areas. And they require 3D positioning technology that can handle arboreal complexity. Now, you might think we already have GPS, right? Isn't that sufficient? Well, the truth is GPS is not sufficient for several reasons. Firstly, it requires line of sight to multiple satellites, which doesn't exist in these kinds of dense, tall urban environments. Secondly, it's not well suited to 3D coordinates. There's just no vertical dimension that's accessible. And thirdly, it's only accurate to several meters, which makes it useless for many near future use cases. So devices and people, and especially vehicles, must have very precise understanding of their 3D location in order to navigate safely and effectively. Now, arboreal environments are also where drone delivery will be most useful, unlocking tremendous efficiency gains and economic opportunities. For example, if you live on a high floor in an apartment building, as millions of people do in these cities, the vast majority of time required for a person to deliver your meal or groceries is spent in the building. This blew my mind when I learned it, waiting for and taking elevators up and down. Now, this may be very different from how you and I live today, but this is where things are headed in many parts of the world. So for drones to navigate accurately requires a new kind of positioning protocol. And finally, we all know about how bad GPS is indoors, right? It doesn't work. It's not designed to work without line of sight to multiple satellites. And since it has no vertical dimension, again, even if it did work, it wouldn't be useful in buildings with many floors or stories. So for all of these reasons, we at Auki Labs are building what we call the pose mesh, which is a decentralized positioning service and infrastructure for low latency, very little delay, collaborative spatial computing. And it's designed with millimeter precision and scalability and privacy in mind. And we believe it's the answer to the complex positioning needs of the emerging near future. Okay, great. So back to why we're speaking with retail audiences, commerce audiences. As we've built this spatial positioning substrate over the past couple of years, we've spoken with many people across a wide range of industries. And of all the types of companies we've spoken with, retailers have been the most enthusiastic because they understand the importance of precise placement of products and information in physical space. Location is everything, right? I mean, eye level is buy level, and eye level shelf space is very limited. And this shelf space has a high monetary value. Retailers sell this space to brands and manufacturers as a key element of the business model. And promotional information must also be attention grabbing, and it also competes for limited space and shopper attention. And for many retailers we've spoken with, including one I spoke with the other day who runs store operations at a large US home goods DIY store, the number one shopper question, he said, 70% of shoppers coming into the store say, where is this product? I can't find this product. Again, just pointing to the critical importance of location. And finally, retail media is growing extremely rapidly because of the huge value of meeting shopper intent with actionable information. So the Pose Mesh enables us to manifest digital information in physical space. Now, this may sound a little bit abstract or philosophical. Would it help to illustrate what I mean by this? I think it would. So great. Take an empty space, place of commerce, like a store. In a matter of minutes and with QR code placement as the only required hardware, we can install a 3D coordinate system on top of the physical space. So say the space is a grocery store with all the typical shelves and fridge cases and frozen areas and produce displays and checkout. With our coordinate system installed, retailers can start placing digital labels and banners and signage anywhere in the store. So as shoppers move throughout the store, they have the benefit of precisely located digital information to help optimize their visit, to find what they're looking for, to discover promotions and deals, to just get in and out efficiently. So how is this digital information experienced? Well, what would be the best way to manifest this digital information in physical space so that humans can experience and interact with it? It might sound like a rhetorical question, a leading question here, right? Because we believe that AR is the inevitable future. Just as it was common wisdom in the late 1990s, some of you might remember this, that everything that can be digital will be. We're confident that everything that can be more usefully manifested in physical space will show up there. Why this is because so much digital information is more useful when it's physically contextualized. So what does AR need to really take off? As a side, I gave talk first just for Apple's Vision Pro announcement. So maybe, as Josh said, that's certainly a wind in our sails here, right? Or sort of shifted the public perspective on AR and the likelihood of it becoming commonplace. But in any case, I actually don't believe it requires hardware on most people's faces to take off. And if we think about what the smartphone crossed the chasm from niche to mainstream, it was the fact that it became the best way to get important things done throughout the day. And AR will also only fully take off when it becomes the best way to get important things done throughout the day. So for businesses, though, AR has to demonstrate revenue generation, cost savings, user adoption, and physical retail, we believe, serves as a natural convergence point for both consumer adoption and business needs. So within physical retail, we believe grocery stores are ideal as a place to reach this tipping point, because around the world, most people visit them multiple times a week, and most are also already on their phones. So I'd like to share a video we shot at a supermarket in Hong Kong recently, actually a few months ago. It includes actual footage from an earlier prototype of our convergent commerce app. Let's watch and listen.
This is Neil. His husband is planning on making a bolognese tonight and has given Neil a helpful shopping list. To find all the items on his list, Neil scans into the AR layer provided by his store. He can now navigate easily to all the items on his list, reducing his shopping time. But the store can also help make helpful suggestions at the moment of shopping, making sure Neil returns home with everything he needs. Parmesan was not on the list for tonight, but is a must. The AR layer has helped Neil find what he was looking for faster without forgetting anything, and the store got to make personalized and timely recommendations when Neil was the most likely to act. Traditional ads and promotions in the store are unlikely to get the consumer's attention, but augmented reality allows the offers to be based on the consumer's intent, profile, and proximity, making them more relevant and actionable. This is the power of AR. Putting the right information in the right place can radically reduce friction in physical commerce. Contact us today to find out how you can make your physical shopping experience better.
So what is this about? Like, what are the benefits this mode of shopping brings to shoppers and to retailers? Simply put, it's really everything we love about e-commerce. It's discovery, its search, and its personalization. And we believe it's inevitable that these benefits will show up in physical retail because people want them, and now the technology is mature enough to deliver them. So let's talk about each one of these for a second. So the first is discovery. Now, discovery is about making products and information easy to see, learn about, engage with, take home with you. And again, in a physical store, eye level is buy level, and only a small fraction of products can be placed at eye level. So precise placement of digital information can help remove this physical constraint. The second benefit is search. Again, where is product X is often the top shopper question, especially among those questions currently asked of store staff. And giving shoppers what we might call self-help ability in the store is aligned with the self-checkout trend, empowering the customer while reducing the burden on store staff, who often don't have the answers anyway, even if you can find one. And we'll remember that Google's early multi-billion-dollar insight was that search keywords that represent things you can buy indicate purchase intent. So meeting shoppers in the moment of purchase intent is enormously valuable. E-commerce, as we know, does this extremely well. And by combining physical location and context with customer data, physical retail can do this too. So the third benefit is personalization. Personalization, when done well, really is the holy grail, as long as we respect privacy and human needs, right? Isn't it strange in 2023 that whether you're a young hipster shopping for oat milk and avocados and bread for your toast, or a middle-aged parent quickly grabbing things for tonight's family meal, or an elderly person looking for products and ingredients that are low salt or gluten-free, you all see the same store. Currently, every shopper sees the same merchandise, product assortment, promotions, regardless of interest, purchase history, demographic, even what the store's first-party data, loyalty data, indicates about you. And e-commerce is able to tailor what's presented to the shopper based on all this data. And we want to bring this personalization to the physical store as well. So to bring this all together, this is our vision of the near future of commerce. We're building a platform we call Convergent for manifesting digital information in physical space. It's built on the Pose Mesh and can be thought of as enabling virtual real estate on top of existing physical space. It offers retailers a new way to activate first-party data that's barely being utilized today, even though it's often collected in loyalty programs. And it goes beyond what retail media can do today because it can be personalized to each viewer on their personal device. All kinds of information can be placed, from simple text labels to 2D images and 3D objects, whatever's most useful for meeting people and customers where they are in that moment of purchase intent. And we use AR to manifest this information since it's the best available technology for doing this. And in the near future, all phones will be enabled for a good AR experience. Not all of them are today. And of course, now we're, as Josh mentioned, sort of into this era of AR glasses feeling like an inevitability, thanks to Apple, as arguably the most influential tech company in the world, sort of throwing its hardware hat in the ring now. And we expect AR glasses to be commonplace for people eventually. Maybe the end of this decade. I think we'll start to see traction well before that. So again, AR is the inevitable future. Does restating this claim make it more believable to you? And we've touched on the practical utility reasons, but people aren't actually predominantly practical or rational, are we? And neither is retail, advertising, or many of the purchase decisions we make. What makes something inevitable? Yoko Ono famously said, "A dream that you dream together is reality." Augmented reality, the conjuring of matterless objects into physical space via digital technology, has the potential to bring people into shared vision, into dreaming together. And yet so far, almost all actual AR experiences have been entirely solo, single player, even isolating. At Auki Labs, we believe that reality is shared. In other words, only what we experience together is real. On reflection, isn't that how we know something is real? If we agree that it's there, that we all experience it? Intersubjectivity is the shared experience of reality. And we've realized that shared AR can enhance intersubjectivity dramatically. Ultimately, AR's deep alignment with what makes us human is what makes it inevitable. There's the human drive to continually evolve our language and communication into more and more visual modes, from emojis to GIFs to video to AR, we believe, because showing is so much more powerful than telling. And there's the human need for presence and togetherness. We crave and create shared experience from the earliest moments of life. So reality is shared. Only what we experience together is real. So today we at Auki Labs are building shared AR to bring people together with what they want and need. And if we look at commerce, look at what it really is, and especially what physical retail is. It's bringing people together with the things they want and need. AR is the inevitable future of commerce because it's a big leap forward in doing what commerce already does. And this is happening now because only now is AR and spatial positioning technology mature enough to enable it. So let's take a look together at how this can work in a familiar kind of store. So this is Jennifer. She arrives at her local grocery store. She scans a QR code. She enters what we call the digital layer of the store. And the things that she wants and need that she's put on her shopping list are shown to her located in the physical space of the store. She's actually exploring a new dietary regimen. So she's looking at almond flour instead of green flour. She doesn't know where this product is, even though this is a familiar store to her. So she can be guided there easily by this convergent commerce app. And she's also being shown by the store, given that she's allowed the store to know about this new dietary intention of hers, to show her products that she hasn't bought in the past, but that are aligned with that new intention. She also goes to a nearby health food focused store and is presented with a lot of different items that are also new to her, different vegan sweets, proteins, milk alternatives, etc. So all of this really is just intended to illustrate the importance and the huge value of putting the right information in the right place at the right time. And in the commerce context, that's really about that moment of purchase intent when it's actionable. So this personalized physical shopping experience reduces what we call time to basket, right? Again, another way of describing what I just described. It's about presenting information about products in that moment, a purchase intent when they're actionable in the form of adding them to your basket as a shopper. And to use advertising language, of course, this promises to increase the conversion rate from product impression to product purchase in the physical store, connecting people with the things they want and need. Now, if that's interesting and relevant to your business, if you're a retailer, or to your brand, if you want to reach people in physical stores, The next question is, how hard is this to set up? Well, I mentioned earlier that we can set up a 3D coordinate system in a physical space using only QR codes. This is new, actually. For years, I, along with the rest of the industry, I don't know if you've been following along with XR or augmented reality technology generally, the rest of the industry has believed that placing digital information and objects in physical space requires scanning each environment to create a digital twin, uploading that digital twin to the cloud. And then whenever you enter a space, the camera feed of your phone is compared to previous scans of that space via machine learning model in the cloud to recognize that space and then know what digital objects and content and where to place them in that physical space. Digital twin approach. This is how Niantic's VPS works, how Google's spatial anchors works. It's the status quo. We're taking a different approach, and it's one that doesn't require scanning of the entire world. We call it matterless domains.
Auki Labs makes augmented reality more accessible than ever. To create your own digital layer on top of a physical space, simply place some lighthouse QR codes around your location to serve as anchors. We recommend placing them frequently so it's easy for everyone to access and recalibrate. Then, measure the distance between the codes using the admin app. The end result is a domain, an empty canvas for you to manifest your knowledge and imagination on, accessible to those you grant permission. What will you make with your matterless domain? Auki Labs. Share your vision.
So it's super easy to set up a matterless domain in any physical space. And again, once it's set up, all kinds of information can be placed inside this domain. So why do we believe AR is the inevitable future of commerce? It's the intersection of everything we've talked about. It's that commerce is connecting people with the things they want and need. It's that commerce, and especially advertising and promotional material and so on, uses information to make these connections. And when information has a natural physical context to it, people connect better with it in that context. And finally, as we've said, the technology has reached sufficient maturity where it's easy enough to set up coordinate systems like this in physical space, and enough devices are AR capable to make it worth doing. But beyond the commercial benefits, we strongly believe that connecting digital and physical, humanity and technology into holistic ecosystems is essential to a thriving future, one in which we understand each other better, understand the things and creatures and spaces and ideas around us better. I mean, we're deep into the era of human co-creation with AI. And if AI is going to fulfill its potential in the world, it needs spatial computing to provide the machines it runs on with proprioception, the kinetic and interactive understanding of the physical world that we have, that living creatures have. In other words, we're expanding what intersubjectivity means to include AI and machines in the shared experience of reality. And the placement and experience of digital information in physical space enables this emerging future of intersubjectivity across species, both carbon-based and silicon-based. And this symbiosis of human technology and nature technology is essential for our thriving, abundant future. I'd like to leave you with this very practical takeaway. The e-commerce is growing at 2 to 3 times the rate of physical retail. Why? It's because e-commerce puts the right information in front of the shopper at the right time, at the moment of purchase intent. The right information in the right place at the right time drives the core benefits of e-commerce: discovery, search, and personalization. And the convergent platform manifests digital information in the right physical place in the store, bringing these benefits to physical retail. So why is AR the inevitable future of commerce? You tell me. Let's talk about it. We've got time. Thank you.
All right, Neil, that was fantastic. Thank you. I have so many Post-it notes. I have so many questions. I love. I mean, it's really really fascinating. And I guess one of the things that's really, and there's just so many terms that you put there, like arboreal and interobjectivity, that I wasn't really familiar with. I guess one of the things I'm really interested in is, when you were showing that arboreal. Sorry,
it's a new term.
It's a new term. I love it. I love a neologism.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think one of the things that's really interesting to me is this idea of the visitor journey. What happens on a website, what happens in the space, what happens after the space. How do you think about that? I mean, where do you see the sort of like the traditional, web device world kind of growing or merging in tandem with what's happening there? Because obviously that whole shopping list is set up probably on a desktop, right? And then it goes to a phone. How do you imagine this sort of the choreography between all these sort of different platforms?
So you're making a distinction, Josh, between what happens on a phone and what happens on other computers, that people use?
Maybe. Mm-hmm. Well, I guess what I'm thinking is that just the affordances of certain different devices. Because I look at, because I think there's this sort of sometimes like all or nothing thinking. You're like, oh, well, like this thing is now, the XR is now going to be like the new interface to the future,
right?
Like that's how we're all going to experience the world. And you can even see all those demos that people sort of like typing in the air, and I'm like, well, that doesn't, I don't really think that's necessarily going to be the case. There's going to be places where you're going to have like keyboards and desktops, and then you're going to have these other devices, and I think it's interesting to think about what are the affordances of these different sort of devices and how that sort of ecosystem might play out.
Right. Absolutely. No, I mean, so we talked about Apple a couple of times. It's kind of hard to forget the impact. If any of you have seen their keynote, a week ago yesterday with the Vision Pro. One thing I'm thinking about is so there's a couple of things. There's the ecosystem, and then there's like sort of new devices and sort of what comes after mobile, right? For many years, people said, well, we're way into the smartphone era. Smartphones are everywhere now. What comes next, right? As if something would come next to replace them. Right, is sort of the sort of media or hype cycle goal, right? It's like, what's the next thing? What's the next big thing? I agree with you, or I think your underlying point, which is that there is no one next big thing, right? I mean, there are lots of different ways that we communicate. Humans have 5 senses. It's commonly said, right? I mean, some people will say there's 6 senses and 7 senses, and even if we just look at Apple. They have created a bunch of different devices, right, that are for their users compelling enough that many people have 2, 3, 4 of them. Different, a laptop, maybe even a desktop if they're serious, like creative producers, phone, an iPad, a watch. Are these people going to buy a purpose-built XR or AR device? Maybe. I think that's Apple's long-term play. But I think to your point, different kinds of communication or different kinds of interaction are sort of better or worse for different types of device, right? I mean, so it's interesting that here, we're all together in this shared audiovisual space. It's still 2D. It falls way short of being physically together, right? But it's also really, really valuable. And one of the things that we've noticed, I didn't mention this in this talk exactly, but we talked about intersubjectivity and what we experience together being really the only thing that's real, right? I mean, there are digital things that are real, but if they're not real time, if they're not part of a shared space of some sort, right, they don't really feel real to us, right? And I think it's fair to use that definition of shared experience, real time, for reality. But we can do that with audio only, even. We can do that with audio video. I think we can do that with digital objects in space. So this is a sort of multifaceted answer. I think there is no one solution to all the modes that we want to communicate in. I would also just add that for any of you who had seen, or even if you haven't seen, right, Apple's Vision Pro announcement at the keynote a week ago Monday, they made it was very heavily naturally human in terms of the new interaction paradigms, right? They made they positioned the fact that there are no controllers at all, nothing like a mouse, nothing like a keyboard that's necessary. I mean, of course, you'd need these things if you're going to work like on documents, but the default interaction paradigm just uses eye gaze, eye tracking, voice, and gestures, right, with your hand. And a lot was made of the fact that you don't have to go out of your way to get the cameras to notice these things, or the microphone to notice these things. You can literally just like chill out on your couch, pinch your fingers together while your hand is relaxed on the couch, and speak and look. And people who have used the device, I haven't, but have just said, once you get used to it after a few minutes, it doesn't feel like you're even using a device. It's just like, and this is very Apple, right? Yeah. And so, and they also, of course, position that historically, right, in the way the Mac popularized the mouse and the iPhone popularized multi-touch on a screen, and so it's in that heritage, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, that's another aspect of what you're talking about. But I'll stop here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was having to try an experiment. So we have a question QA from Jean-Pierre. Do you want to go on camera for a second and ask your question?
Hello?
Hello, Jean-Pierre.
Hello, Jean-Pierre.
Thank you so much. This was really, really fascinating. I appreciate it. My question is about internet connectivity, right? I know in vertically stacked stores that, kind of the ground trying to connect to the store's Wi-Fi, right, to really get a solid connection. So how important do you see that in kind of improving before AR experiences really take off retail?
Yeah, it's a basic and important question. So thank you for it. And I've been working with, as many of you have, with retailers for many years, and it's yes, you need to have good Wi-Fi, and that is a challenge, I think, for many, not just retailers, but people who run public physical spaces, right? So, and I'm certainly, as a technologist, looking forward to iOS and Android operating system level improvements that will just make it easier to get on a Wi-Fi network as you move around the world. But to your question, Jean-Pierre, I mean, it is important, especially for stores where there are certain store formats, like going later today to demo at a gas station convenience store chain, this platform that we're building. And because of the store format, it's a small store. And so there are windows, and it has decent access to cell signal from anywhere in the store, right? Which is important. But connectivity is required. And if you're deep inside a mall and your cell doesn't work, then a lot of this won't work either. And for what it's worth, I mean, at Auki Labs, what we're building is, we're doing everything we can to minimize dependency on connectivity. The data that we share is very, very minimal. I mean, the data that we transport, it's all, by the way, someone's probably going to ask this, or someone's thinking this, the privacy implications of using first-party data about customers to personalize the experience. Our stance is that's data between you as a customer of a retailer and the retailer, right? They already collect data about you. So that's nothing, no data that I ever see in our platform. It's just sort of, they would plug in their platform into their, or plug in our platform into their app, their infrastructure, and retain that sort of private first-party data that they already have. So that's a lot.
Yeah,
it's sort of it's answering a second unasked question, but I think it's a question that ought to be on people's minds, right? Like, what are the privacy implications of all this personalization that we've been talking about for many years, right?
Thanks, Jean-Pierre. That was a great question. I think one of the things that where my mind goes is all the different implications of this, which is that if you have this sort of digital layer, you're going to have all this different content layers on top of it. I would imagine that, like, Vino, the wine app, will have a layer on the wine. Will want to have a layer on the wine store. I'm sure, like, the New York Times food section is going to be wanting to give you the curated path through your supermarket, as will any number of other food places. So it's like, and then I'm sure there's going to be like a ways of interior navigation so that you avoid crowds. And I'm sure your mind has been in this space a lot longer than I have. So like how do you think about sort of like how all these sort of things that we saw sort of aggregate over the internet? I'm sure analytics will be a massive spatial analytics will be huge. Like what are all the different sort of threads that you've sort of seen coming out of this?
Sure. So I think you're pointing to, like, if we imagine that what I'm presenting here actually comes to pass,
Sure.
right? It's still, I mean, it's fair to say it's hypothetical until it's fully real. I mean, there are definitely people who would argue against this thesis, particularly the face-worn AR. If you follow Scott Galloway at all, he was just like, this is never going to happen. This is a stillborn product, Apple's Vision Pro. I mean, his own, but yeah. People aren't going to wear stuff on their faces, right? And if they don't, they're also not going to walk around the world holding their phones up all the time, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're okay holding our phones down here, but maybe not up here all the time, right? So anyway, there are lots of reasons why this, I suppose, may not happen, or why you could argue it may not happen. But if it does happen, right, that we experience the world through digital, or that digital objects and information do really show up in our physical environment, then there's, you can think about it as what's the browser for digital information in physical space generally, right? Like I go through the world, am I going to have to like download everybody's app every time I go to a new space, whether it's a store or a downtown municipal district or a hotel or a coffee shop, right? I mean, like it, and this sort of raises the question of standards, right? Like, going back decades, the World Wide Web as a set of standards made it possible to have probably billions by now, right, of websites, maybe hundreds of millions. I don't know if they're billions yet, but like that anyone can interconnect with any other one, link to any other one, right? And so there's this sense of like everything that's on the web being part of the shared space. I mean, obviously with the caveats that certain countries like China, are trying to cordon off, what's happening there from the rest of the world and so on. But so we definitely want there to be standards for all of this, so there isn't this incredible fragmentation, which I think is what you're really asking about, right? Like, how do we get to a place where there's sort of standards-based browsing or moving through the physical world and experiencing digital objects and information in a way that's not like, which of the 500 channels is this space connected to, right? I mean, to use an outdated but like sort of cable era metaphor, right? I mean, which one of the hundreds of apps that I could be downloading is the one to find what's digitally placed in this physical location, right? So
it's funny. You took it through a negative lens. I love it. I actually think it's like super exciting. I mean, I think I don't worry about fragmentation. I think it's actually like really, I think it's amazing that like you could show up at a Whole Foods and be like, I just want to like cook something Asian, and that like you can make that point of decision in that space. Be like, okay, well, here's the things that you could cook, choose it and go get it as quickly as possible. And I think, I'm obviously, my background's in the museum space. And I think about anything, and that's a place that there's a tremendous amount of context that is completely invisible to the visitor. It's like, right. And not just informational, like, it's like story and, and it's like, well, how do you go to a place like the Met, which has all these objects that they don't want to belabor with, millions of wall labels or video monitors. And, how do you provide that sort of contextual layer? And remix that contextual layer and allow other people to remix that contextual layer, in a way that like you could just keep that place incredibly fresh without having to change the underlying structure.
Right. Yes. No, absolutely. And I've done a little bit of work with museums while I was at Gensler starting 2015 for a little while, which I think is how we originally got connected, maybe through SCGD. So I had spoken at SCGD X Lab a couple times. And so that's where I really got started thinking about how can digital technology of various kinds be sensitive to where we are individually as humans in physical space, and sort of personalize the audio, the visual, the interactive digital functionality to that moment of our movement through the physical world. And museums are a great example, because people, if you tried to put information for every single possible person that would show up in front of an exhibit or a piece of work in a museum, it just wouldn't work. And so the compromise is, occasionally, in very international places, there'll be a couple different languages describing the work or something like that. But increasingly it's being done digitally, right? Which is the right way. And so to your point about the negative lens, I feel like I'm just being realistic. Like, we've gone, one of the downsides, I think, of the Apple era is that there's an app for everything, which if you don't have it, you have to get it, right? And so, and maybe you don't even know that there is one, right? So there are pros and cons, right? And I think that this is why I'm saying a browser for digital information object physical. It's just like been working on interoperability standards for metaverse. I think there's a real opportunity for those of us who work with various kinds of clients and people who own physical spaces to collaborate on standards, right? Just as there are standards for environmental graphic design or experiential graphic design and just sort of accessibility standards for physical space and all kinds, there's worlds of standards, right? And they're by country and jurisdiction and so on. But I think that same approach is important to take in the digital realm too, right? That we need to look at, like, how do people experience digital information and objects in a accessible, in a equitable, in a standards-based way. So we're just at the early stages of that. And I think there hasn't been much work done on that yet because it's just such a frontier still. But I think this is one of the things that I'm hoping to come out of Apple throwing its hat in the ring in here, because there's a way in which it's a high bar to say something is inevitable in the technology world until Apple does it. And after Apple does it, people don't want to bet against that. I mean, they have a history of introducing new categories of devices very successfully, right? And defining a category that actually becomes a mass market category.
Yeah, and I think also that thing you said about the best way to get things done, and it's like, I can, you can look at this and be like, there's a lot of there's a lot of opportunity to make our physical worlds a lot more interesting and a lot more accessible and to remove a lot of friction, so, and to make them just like more connected and collaborative and magical. So I think these devices will help. So David has a question in the Q&A. I'd say also, I saw there's some questions in the chat, just throw them over in the Q&A and then we'll run through it. So David, if you want to come on camera, we can ask your question. Assuming everyone's okay with this.
Hey, Neil.
Hi, David.
I think the last time we connected was literally the SEGD thing in New York. And I'm going to say circa not 1900, probably 2014 or 2015. I think we shared the stage back then, which was kind of crazy now seeing you here. But
yes, no, great to see you again.
Yeah, so here's the question, and I'm totally on board with the intersubjectivity piece. I think that is really interesting, and I think it's a foundational element to great placemaking anyway, is that you share experience, and in the sharing of it, it becomes more relevant to you. But let me ask a question about the idea of discovery, insofar as you've shown it in the video. When the discovery process is still curated through AI or someone making decisions about the thing you might really want by if you're looking for X, does it sort of short circuit, I'm going to say, the true sort of discovery process and the joy of the totally serendipitous finding that you come up with, which I think is part of the joy of going to the grocery store in a way, right? There's all that other stuff on the shelf that you never thought you needed, but oh my God, there it is. But when we get to the point where we're curating discovery, aren't those two things, aren't they coming at it from two different points of view? And is it true discovery if not letting it happen through, I say, the serendipitous moment, where something is there that was never expected. And because of that, it adds a certain level of joy. It seems like we're still pushing towards efficiency and productivity here. Get in, get out, find my path so I can get there quickly. Whereas sometimes it's just great to, I love the term hodological, which is ancient Greek term about the discovery of space and pathways through space. That is not necessarily the straight line. That is the best one. So I'm curious as if you could just riff on that a bit.
I love everything you shared, David. I mean, that's very well put and beautifully put, to be honest. It is something I think about personally. And, I'm using the term discovery because I think it's used a lot in commerce and particularly with the connotation of sort of, you might call assisted discovery, right? Recommendation maybe is a more specific term that if Amazon and Instagram and whoever else, right, that knows you a little bit and feels like they know you well enough to make some recommendations or help you discover things they think you want to see. Serendipity is another term I love. Thank you for using it. I do think these are different. I mean, there's a whole spectrum, right? I think we've probably all, hopefully, had moments of sort of being presented something, either by a person or digitally, that we weren't intentionally looking for, we weren't consciously looking for, but it actually was welcome in the moment, right? Whatever came together, like we had a moment of attention, a moment of interest, and it felt a little bit serendipitous, right? So I feel like discovery can feel joyful and serendipitous if it's done well, right? And you mentioned AI. I think we're just at the early moments of scratching the surface of what's possible in terms of evolving technology so that, I hate interruptive advertising, right? I've worked in advertising for a while. Interruptive advertising shows up in the physical world too, right? Billboards, and there's a lot of ugly crap out there, right? That's brand messages, paid placements, paid media. And so, and there are sort of dystopian visions of where all of, a lot of what I've been describing here could go. There's a video called Hyper-Reality, which if you ever want to see like a 6-minute dystopia of the possible future of AR, go check that out. So, but all of this is to say, I think you can think of this really simply as any tool set or tool, right? I mean, we can create a dystopia, or we could actually support the feeling of joyful serendipity, which I think we can get through certain kind of technologically mediated realms as well. So maybe it'll just help, David, just to sum up by saying, I and the people I've chosen to, I haven't worked in a tech startup for many years, right? I've been doing consulting and working with Gensler and other agencies and so on, but I've decided to join with Auki Labs because they also share this vision of being very humane, creating intersubjectivity through technology, and really as a salve or like a balm or a healing of what we've experienced last year, 20 with social media, right? Which I think to a very large degree in a kind of documented, irrefutable way now has, because it's asynchronous largely and not real time being with other people, it has driven wedges between us as individuals and as political parties and as societies, and I think I really want to be part of using technology to help solve the differences that people have with each other and with other groups of people, right? And I think that experiencing reality together and creating more intersubjectivity is a part of that.
Yeah, that was a great question. I also, it's funny that you mentioned social media, because I would imagine that in some ways, a lot of the design patterns that we see on the internet will move into the physical space. So we'll have, like, in the same way that you have your promoted content, your Instagram feed, you will have promoted content in a physical environment.
You already do. We already do. Like,
yeah,
there's
exactly,
like check out aisle stuff in every store. There's like media in every store. I mean, physical placement is promotional.
Totally.
Right. I mean, this is how stores think of it. So
it's just it's like another way to remix and, to create more hierarchy within these spaces, which is, like, honestly interesting and fascinating. The thing that I think I always put out there, which is that, like, the future is not inevitable. It's all about whether we're all the people making this stuff. So it's really on us, who creates the good stuff or not. I think we have another question from Ralph in the QA. Ralph, do you want to come on camera? This might be our last question because we only have 8 minutes left.
Hi there.
Hello.
Hi, Neil.
Hello, Ralph.
Hi. Thank you. It was a great presentation, and I really loved the vision that you set out. I do have a question though, and it's more kind of, well, you have a fantastic vision, and I was thinking about the practical side. I do have some experience in the navigation space, and what I really loved about what you showed about this AR app for a supermarket is that it provides you the location where to find the product. Because what I think is that people don't necessarily have a navigation problem in a supermarket, but a location problem. Where can I find the carciofi, where can I find the bread, not how to get there, because the layouts are not very well, not very very hard to navigate. But I've seen a couple of these initiatives, maybe you know them, Hyper and Orient, and I also see the comments from people down there, and sometimes I think, yeah, maybe these comments make sense, and they say, well, supermarkets is typically, they have lots of recurring visitors and not so many new visitors. And when I'm in the new supermarket, I have no idea where everything is. When I'm in my supermarket that I frequently visit, let's say every weekend to do the groceries for the whole week, I know where everything is. So my question is, how is this not a solution that is looking for a problem, or is this really a solution that will make our lives really easier? Yeah, well, that's basically the question there.
Yeah, no, 100%. Thanks for that question, Ralph, and your observations. I agree with you. I guess the short answer, a couple points. One is, like I said, for any technology, and certainly for AR, because it's unfamiliar now, it's only going to cross the chasm into mainstream use if it becomes the best way to get important things done, right? Things you really care about. So we're not going to exist. Auki Labs as a company, whatever, like this whole push towards AR is just not going to succeed if it doesn't reach that standard, right, of being the best way to get certain things done. So we'll see. Absolutely. I mean, so Hyper AR has built some like cool technology in terms of navigation and wayfinding in stores. I haven't experienced it yet. Personally, I'm curious if anyone here has or knows like where the stores are in New York. I've actually asked their CEO. I would love to experience it. The reason why we're not going hard at sort of A to B navigation or turn-by-turn navigation, although we do have this capability on our platform, is because although I think end users, you might say, or consumers, don't really like that word, but just individuals visiting spaces seem to think it's cool, it's not ever of business value or enough business value to retailers or people that own spaces to invest in it, in my experience. Like we've seen many attempts at this, like Macy's in New York, I know has had like 3 or 4 different companies over the last 10 years try to do AR in-store navigation, and none of those solutions are still operational in that store. So your point is right, I think, Ralph, like people who are regulars at a store know where things are. This is why I pointed out sort of promoted products or recommended products. I mean, I think it turns out there are many more people than I thought that shop the promotions or shop the deals every week. You know, there's like what's on special at my local store, and maybe you don't know where those things are because they're new products to you. And so it makes sense to the store and to people who are shopping the deals or the discounts for the week to need guidance, right? To be shown where those products are. So we're trying a bunch of different like value propositions, you might say, like different ways that this could be valuable in a grocery context and in other retail contexts as well.
All right, Neil, that was fantastic. Well, we're kind of at time, but this was absolutely amazing. Really, really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Josh.
Yeah, I would say if anyone has any sort of follow-up questions, feel free to email me. I'll pass them on to Neil. We'll be posting this video hopefully in a few weeks. But again, many, many thanks to Neil. Greatly appreciate the time, the insights, the introduction to a whole lot of amazing new terms. We'll have another one of these future spaces coming up in a couple of weeks. Please join us. And again, Neil, safe travels. Have a great one. Really, truly appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Josh. Thanks, Nadia. Take care, everyone.